Hey there, Tony here from Chrono Force Studios. In today's devlog, we'll be going over the Dagger primary ability stab, how I hooked it up to the gameplay ability system, the preliminary work I did on the backstab and death from above abilities to highlight the enemy as a prompt for when those abilities can be used. I'll also be talking about some of the tests I did with the Unreal Animation IK goal system and some tests I did with a recent Windows build.
The first thing I had to do to create the Dagger stab ability was to make the animation in Blender. One of the issues that I ran into was that after retargeting the animation, the body was offset, which I'll show here by retargeting. You can see they jump, and then if I switch the parent back to the new object and go into pose mode, you'll see that the mesh itself gets distorted in weird ways, which is definitely a problem. It took me a while to figure out why this wasn't working, since the pistol animation remaps that I did previously and were saved to this file worked properly, but after some testing I figured out that somehow the roots of both the Unreal and Deform rig had gotten off center. So after recentering these, as I'll show here, we can go in and select both and then redo the target again, retarget the animation. Now if we go in and select the pose mode for the Unreal one, we can make changes if it's parented right. So that just switches the parent between Deform and Unreal. And then now all of the animations work correctly again. After creating the animation in Blender, I also had some issues with the import when I tried to get it into Unreal. So I went to import, as I'll show you here, the attack animation. I remapped it to Manny, which is the skeleton that I based everything off of and works through my import pipeline. Once it imports, I'm just going to delete these two. These are extra actions that I don't need. And then this is the backstab animation. So as you can see here, it looks correct on the default, but when you go and create a montage out of it, we're going to create montage and go inside there and change the preview to the actual player character, which I'm going to be using, you can see that it all gets stretched out, which isn't what we want. So what I ended up having to do was, you just got to remember to do this part, is to go in here and change the source to the animation that you plan to be using, and then update it. Now when you go in here and choose the preview asset to be the same, it looks correct, so we'll save that. And then when you go into the montage, you'll see that here, if we go and change this to the fixed as well and apply to asset, it looks correct as well. So it just reminds me that I have to go through and make the proper tutorials for these to show making sure that everything's on center in Blender, using these retargeting when you get into this side, to make sure that everything imports the way that you need it to. So it just reminds me that I have to document my process better and follow my process once I create it, to avoid these problems in the future. Once I had my animation imported, the next step was to get the stab ability to play it. I did this by using the play montage and wait node inside the primary dagger ability, stab. To ensure the dagger only applied damage during the attacks, I set up an animation notify system that would enable a collider during specific parts of the attack. The collider can be seen here on the dagger, and we can see it here, enabling and becoming visible when the damage would normally be applied. To set this up, what I did was create two functions on the base GAS character class, which both the player and the guard get derived from, and it exposes these two functions to enable or disable your equipment damage, which as you can see in the notify blueprint, when we get it, we take the owner and we cast it to our base character, which both the player and the guard are derived from, and then just call the corresponding enable or disable function on their active equipment. So that would get routed in this case to the dagger and their set collision enable, which just takes the box collider in this case and enables or disables the generate overlap events. And this can be, as we add more equipment, this is going to change. You might have different box colliders or multiple, depending on what the weapon is. So this will just come in, and then we just rewrite this for everyone. And I just added this little bit so that you could see it like we showed in the last section, showing the box colliders as you attacked. With the animation playing and the collider boxes being enabled, the next step was to actually go in and make sure the damage was applied. We did this by using the wait gameplay event node, which, as the name implies, will wait for a gameplay event to come in and then continue on with the activation. So this occurs right after we play the montage. It'll just sit here waiting for a damage event and then move on to applying it. In this case, it'll be to whatever valid target comes in, and it'll give the dagger damage to it. And the way that this event gets into this system is that inside the dagger itself, when the attack occurs, the colliders will be enabled so that in the event graph we can wait for this overlap event for those colliders. And when that occurs, we just make sure again we're using our GAS character, and we'll send it a gameplay event, in this case the damage, and then give it a payload so that when we're back in here, it'll move this data through and, like I said, apply the damage to the target. The last thing I had to do for the damage was to hook up a trigger event so that when anything derived from the GAS character was hit, it would call the appropriate on-change health function in the blueprint. There's some things I have to do through C++. It's the only way to actually set up these efficient callbacks for specific values that change. But as much as possible, I like to run it back into the blueprint system because I find it's less buggy in the blueprint system and it's faster to kind of throw things together as I need them and then just clean them up later as needed. So what I did is I created this callback and set it up through here so that whenever the value specifically changed, it would go and call that update function. Then on the enemy, it would bind to this health change and go through, and this is just the logic to go and update the health bar when those changes occur, and also make sure that everything is up to date that needs to be as far as death state and things like that. As you can see here, when you stab the guard character, the health bar will go down. With the basic stab attack created, I turned my attention to detecting the two special attacks, backstab and death from above. Every piece of equipment has a stance class actor that gets instantiated and added to the base character whenever that equipment is picked up. The equipment also defines the stance that the character will go into, so either the player or the guard character, which generally just changes how the movement occurs and works with the animation blueprint to give you certain things. So in the pistol's case, the pistol stance will change it so that you're aiming your pistol and looking down the sights. The dagger one will have your movement change slightly to work with the dagger animations. The other thing that's defined are the classes for the primary ability, primary alt ability, and secondary ability. These class names are fed into the activate ability by class, which takes in the ability component from either the player or guard, and then tries to activate that ability on it as long as it's been granted to it. And part of equipping a weapon will also grant those abilities. So if you, let's say, click the right mouse button and activate your primary, it'll route through the controller and the character, then try to go through here and activate the right corresponding class. This allows me to switch it out so that every weapon has its own set of abilities and classes that'll get activated correctly as a package. Getting back to the stance actor, this gets instantiated and added to the player character, and it holds all the extra logic that would be needed for any given piece of equipment. So in the case of the dagger, it actually holds the two capsules that are used to detect certain scenarios. So if the guard is in front of you, it'll probably be in this capsule or multiple guards, and it helps me select which one you could potentially backstab. And then this death from above capsule helps to look for things that are below you and give you the option to do death from above if certain conditions are met. So if you look into the different things that I have here, I have all the specific logic that will wait for specific events, whether they be overlap or things like that, and then update it so that it highlights specific characters to allow you to do those special moves. What this allows me to do is make sure that I don't have a bunch of extra logic running in the background when I don't need to, so I don't have all these capsules for every possible weapon and scenario running. I only have the ones that are for specific equipment that you have equipped and on you at the time, which saves on processing and just makes things a lot cleaner for the logic and organizing the various weapons and effects that can happen in the game. One of the issues that I ran into was that initially I had it so that the overlap events would detect when a target would come in and out of a capsule like you're seeing here. They turn green when your ability could be used, the death from above. But I found when I did things like fall and make it so that it would turn off if you're like at the same level as your target, I couldn't reactivate it easily if you jump back up on something because the overlap event only occurs when something leaves and comes back, but if they consistently stay inside your sphere, it doesn't work. So what I ended up doing was making it so that every tick or every update, it would just get a list of all the targets in the sphere and then go ahead and make updates that way so that I could apply my logic every frame and ensure that everything would work correctly. I've done that with the Dagger here, and you can see that it works really well. If I jump up too high, it doesn't work, but it comes back even though they're still within the sphere. And on all the other logic, so that you have to be within a certain distance behind them, is working as well. So these are some of the issues that I came across and had to kind of correct as I went to work with the Unreal system and their capsules and overlaps and all that other stuff. One of the other things I worked on this week was the material for highlighting targets when you have special abilities that can be used. So in the case of the Dagger, I have two that I set up, which is the red for backstab and the green for when you can do death from above. And I created this custom material that can be put into the overlay material slot of a character to, I'll show you here, to highlight them a specific color so you know that that ability is available. I'm also going to be putting a UI cue in the bottom right or wherever it ends up being that shows the key and the ability. So let's say backstab and let's say, you know, right click to use, or if you're above them and it turns green, you can right click to do death from above. So that's something else that I've been working on to kind of flesh out the rest of these things, and it's actually the stances that also control that. They'll add the material temporarily to the overlay and then remove it from whatever the target is. So that's something else that I've been working on this week. The last thing I worked on this week was the IK goal system. I wanted to play around with it a bit because I've noticed that when you do the dagger stab, there's some issues where it's a little hard to aim it sometimes, and I wanted to slightly move towards whatever your target is. You'll have a certain range that you can attack in still, so you can't just like attack anywhere around you, but it'll give you a little bit more flexibility so you don't have to be right on, and make it work a bit better. So I played around with that a little bit to see how that worked, and I think I'll be able to do it pretty easily. I just have to hook these up to variables and tweak them as needed, and I'll also hook that up into the equipment system so that each piece of equipment can enable it if it needs to, and then do a bit of IK rig reorienting for some of these goals to make the weapons, you know, have a bit more polish and to actually improve the gameplay a bit, so it feels better and it's a little easier to use. I also took the time to do a quick test build just to make sure that everything that I've created so far is working correctly and generally get a feel for the FPS. In testing, I found that there was actually some issues with my FPS, but mainly it was due to issues with too many lights and stuff that I hadn't really optimized because it was just a bunch of test stuff that was in the scene. Once I cleaned that up, everything worked a lot better. I also added some quick keys to add for, FPS counts to the system and changed some display settings, but generally everything's working really good. I'm liking the performance, so that's good. I can keep trucking on, working on the different systems in the back end, and then just keep testing periodically to make sure that everything's going to work the way that we need to have a game that runs bug-free in the end. When you just make a list of everything that I worked on this week, it actually isn't that long, but as you can see, as I've gone through everything here, there's actually a lot of subtlety that goes into each of these systems, and a bit of tweaking and learning, and some of it's because there's new systems in 5.4 that I haven't learned about in Unreal. Other stuff, it's gameplay and it just takes tweaking. It's rare that you get things exactly right the first time. So it is going well. It's taking a bit of time. This video is a bit late getting out because I was doing a lot last week and I was running a bit behind, and I've been a little under the weather, so I wasn't able to get it out right away. But this video is out now, so hopefully we'll be back on track and be able to truck through. As far as my list goes for the things I wanted to accomplish, I'm only about halfway from the list that I made for last week's work. So I just put 2 weeks worth of work in 1 week worth of scheduling. So this week my plan is to continue on this, finish up these various systems. Now that I have the baseline for Dagger, it's kind of the template that all the other weapons and equipment are going to use. So just getting that once going through with activating abilities, damage, stance, getting all that set up and working nicely, I'm in a nice place to just start fleshing out a lot more of these weapons and equipment and getting them out of my test code and into the proper ability systems. So I'm hoping that's going to go really quickly this week, and that I finish up the list that I had for last week this week, and that everything will start to really start trucking along quickly.
That's all for today. Be sure to like and subscribe or join the newsletter in the link below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.